Far from it all, at the end of the world, is an isolated archipelago between the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean, New Zealand. This country's history is one of the shortest in the world because it is one of the last territories discovered by mankind only 1,000 years ago. When the Maori, a Pacific people, first laid foot on this land, they encountered a dangerous environment dominated by menacing volcanoes and punctured by geysers. They christened it the Land of Long White Clouds. Situated in the Pacific Ocean's Ring of Fire, where volcanoes are aligned in a 25,000-mile horseshoe shape, this hostile and sacred territory impresses with its climate and magnificent scenery. It was not until 1840 that the English settlers began to clear and cultivate these wild lands. Nearly a century later, New Zealand turned to exporting its goods, and the busy port of Auckland demonstrates the archipelago's vitality in global trade. For 40 years on the South Island, in the Marlborough Valley, new settlers have succeeded in a bold gamble to grow vineyards. Stretching for nearly 42,000 acres, it is the country's main winemaking region. Peter Yeland is one of New Zealand's largest private wine producers. He managed this feat of building a vineyard of almost 5,000 acres on an unpredictable and capricious land.
This is the extent of the damage in here. We've got a really big crease. This was bulged the other way, and this tank has rocked on its mounts, lost height. Basically, it's lost about 75 millimetres of height. Was coming out like a rounded bit, and now that round has been gone from convex to concave, and this is the problem. It makes it unusable because we cannot clean it.
The Marlborough Valley and its vineyards are located on major fault systems that extend from north to south. They are known as the Wara, Awaterer, and Southern Valley fault lines. Up to 20,000 tremors are recorded here each year.
This apparatus is what we call in New Zealand a trig station. And it's put here by our geologist as a form of measuring land movements. So as the plates are pushing and pulling, and in this instance this plate is actually rising, this lets them, it enables them to actually measure the movements. And just over 2 years ago we had a massive earthquake. It was about 6.8 on the Richter scale, and it caused a lot of damage in the region, and it was centred just 5 kilometres out here in the sea. And when that happened, this here actually rose up about 200 millimetres, and it went north about 150 millimetres. And that was just basically the plates here, the other plates here, and it just, that earthquake just jolted it up. And you know, our lifespan's just a very, very short time, so this is happening all the time. And that's sort of a good example of how this land is just pushed up out of the sea.
On February 14, 2016, a high-magnitude earthquake shook the entire coast bordering the vineyards.
Over here on that bluff in the distance, that's called Vernon Bluffs. There was just thousands and thousands of tons of earth rolling into the sea. It created a mini tidal wave as all that dirt come in. It destroyed quite a nice fishing ground there as well. So yeah, I hope we don't have too many more like that for some time.
From one region to another, the forces of New Zealand's nature are often demonstrated. From north to south, a volcanic chain stretches, dominated by the still active Tongariro. Here ends the Pacific Ocean's ring of fire that borders 3 continents. Everything seems to remind us of Ruwaimoko, considered by the island's first peoples as god of volcanoes and earthquakes and creator of the world. Dr. Mike Johnston, geologist and seismologist, studied for 20 years the stigma of these telluric events, particularly those present in the wine valley of Marlborough.
New Zealand is a small, isolated country in the southwest Pacific, a long way from anywhere else, and the reason it is there is that it's actually astride the plate boundary between the Pacific plate, which underlies much of the Pacific Ocean, and the Australian plate, which extends through the Tasman Sea to Australia and through to India. If it wasn't for this plate boundary, then New Zealand wouldn't be here. Within that mountainous region is that there are major faults, including the Alpine Fault, which extends right up through the South Island. It's erosion along these faults which are causing these fault angles, which has actually given you the major valleys of the Wairau and the Awatri and others further south. And as the rivers erode down through that, they've actually widened the valley. Material is eroded in off the mountains on either side to partly infill the valleys, giving you fertile river plains, which have been utilised for the last few decades, converting into vineyards.
Despite this land's capriciousness, these large expanses were largely exploited. First by extensive sheep breeding, for many years the island's main cultural activity, but over the past 40 years, the pastures have given way to rows of vines. Today, they cover almost 90,000 acres. A surprising development for a country that originally had no winemaking tradition. A story that Steve Austin, historian and curator at the Marlborough Museum, tries to write by collecting the archives and testimonies of New Zealand's winemakers.
The early settlers started to bring sheep and cows with them. In those days, in Victorian New Zealand, all the great farmhouses had small vineyards, orchards, vegetable patches. Really, our wine history also involves the early Catholic missionaries, and they were making wine for the sacrament, for the communion.
Really, though, in Marlborough, our first commercial winery started in the early 1870s, 1873. And this was a Scottish winemaker called David Hurd, and he was at Meadowbank. But it's really only 100 years later, around 1972, 1973, and Montana are starting to purchase large farms in Marlborough. They had been looking for some time for an area that they could grow grapes on a good scale. Montana, really over one weekend, became one of the biggest landowners and ended up with some large sheep farms as well. Then gradually they were able to sell off the sheep, select the best areas for growing grapes, and that really is the birth of the modern wine industry here in Marlborough. Because of the earlier industries to do with dairy farming and sheep farming, we had a lot of men who were very good at working outside in all weather conditions. Stainless steel industry, which had developed to make tanks for the dairy industry, they were all there really. And so when Montana was ready to invest in Marlborough, we were really ready to go.
In just 2 generations, the New Zealand viticulture boom turned into a fantastic commercial success, and the Maori communities played an important role in the development. On board the ferry in the middle of Cook Strait, named for its illustrious English discoverer, James Wheeler embodies the Maori culture. A defender of the preservation of this culture, he is also the founder of the country's only Maori wine, the tohu.
Our land that had been confiscated by the government, we got that back in 1977, and so we started growing our apples and kiwi fruit and pears. And I guess that's when we started thinking about our culture, what we could do with it. And so why don't we grow some of our grapes and put them in a bottle and put our story on the back label, and then we can export that plus our culture around the world. Tohu, intrinsic part of the New Zealand wine culture, and certainly there's that Maori flavour, if you like, of our culture is permeating the New Zealand wine culture.
Maori culture has permeated the island's Anglo-Saxon culture. This cultural recognition affects and influences all of New Zealand's communities. The Tohu Vineyard is located in the Awatara Valley, one of Marlborough's sub-regions. Here, the art of pauahiri is perpetuated from generation to generation. And it's in the privacy of the family business that a welcoming ceremony honors the patriarch on his return. Far from the ceremonies for tourists, in which tens of Maori in traditional dress are gathered, the origin of pauahiri is in fact limited to a single warrior who defies the hosts. This recalls that the ceremony was performed both for the reception of friends and enemies. In harmony with the souls of the ancestors and the god protectors, the warrior invokes Mother Nature to salute the honor of the winemaker. The karanga, the women's song, signifies welcome to the estate's visitors, and it calls for exchange. A ritual ceremony of meaning and acceptance that ends with the hongi, the traditional Maori handshake. Nature is an essential component of the Maori culture. It is never far away when it comes to identity.
So got the new label
What are you
here.
up to? Oh yeah, okay.
Come have a look at this. It's looking really good. I'm sure you'll be happy.
It really is, actually, it does stand out. It's a great label. That depicts the koro, the unfolding of new life.
Sure.
And of course, down the bottom, there's two figures. You and me on the left-hand side, standing on Papatuanuku, which is the earth, our earth here, our vineyards, and people who are working with us, and our arms are up and we're reaching for the sky or reaching for our horizons.
The kuru still exists here with the new label, and so we haven't forgotten about where we've come from, because it's always important to never forget where you've come from.
More than simply the guardians of their lands, the Maori are the guardians of their entire environment, where sea, mountains, rivers, and lakes are considered as gods. Today, Maori culture, based on respect for nature, plays an integral role in the movement for sustainable agriculture. Peter Yearlins shares this approach. He's constantly seeking solutions to preserve the ecosystem. He produces his compost from natural elements.
Here we have what I call mulch or compost. This is more mulch, and it's primary this time sawdust and mussel shells from our mussel industry, which I was involved in the infancy, and it really works. It's a great product. but this here will rot down. All the organic material will disappear. It might take 6 to 12 months, and then we'll be left with a layer of shell. This concept is my baby, my brainchild, if you like, and it's now accepted as a good opportunity. But to start with, there was a few doubters out there. A lot of the concern was around what the salt levels could be, because the ground is quite salty anyway. But none of those concerns have come to fruition. It's great. Everyone's on board now, and everyone's taking credit for it now.
A merit whose origin lies in this naturally fertile landscape due to its volcanic origin. Each eruption spreads debris rich in minerals that formed a natural fertilizer. The Marlborough Valley also benefits from the presence of the Marlborough River, which acts as a thermal regulator. But the growers who settled the region changed the landscape and forest vegetation. Many forests on the plates disappeared. The valley is less protected, and effects from prevailing winds are more pronounced. For 4 years, the climate has become more extreme, with droughts and more periods of intense cold. A very new phenomenon. Even in spring, temperatures can drop below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. At this time, when the vines are flowering, it's a catastrophe for wine growers. The climatologist Stu Powell was commissioned to find solutions to this problem.
You don't have to go too far either side of this road, in fact, to have quite a vastly different climate and with different frost risks. There can be up to 10 or even 12 degrees variation on a cold night across the region. We had a few nasty events go through last year in November. We had 3 frosts actually, 3 events which is quite unusual to have 3 in the last spring month in New Zealand. However, there was quite a bit of damage around the region, particularly further inland. So as part of the work that I do, I provide a frost forecast to the industry. I have a number of weather stations scattered around the region that enable me to see what's going on.
Today, Stu Powell must install a new telemetric station in one of the vineyards of the valley. This unit will help to alert and counter the effects of the frost that's becoming frequent in the spring, a moment when the vine's flower is particularly fragile.
So we have here a weather station and a frost alarm unit. So what this will do is it will give the winery advanced warning of a frost, and when temperatures reach a critical 1 degree, plus 1 degree, it will trigger this wind machine here to come on and help protect the vineyard from frost. It enables them to monitor the temperature live in real time and gives them a better understanding of where the cold air is on the vineyard. And then that data is accessible through the internet onto a cell phone or a laptop. And this is one of the more basic units, but these weather stations can be built up to record all sorts of things from rainfall, wind speed, humidity, soil moisture, and they can be quite sophisticated. All these things and technology helps to improve the day-to-day operation of the vineyard. So you'll see the blades start to turn around up there, and what they're going to do when they get fast enough is drag warm air that's higher above the ground and they mix it through the colder air that sits near the ground during a frost event. And all going well, that should protect the vineyard from frost.
Though some climate changes in the Marlborough region are man-made, 620 miles north, it's the winemakers who must adapt to nature's new effects. Global warming causes rising temperatures, and in the past 5 years, that's creating longer and hotter summers, destabilizing the entire ecosystem of the north of the country. On the tiny island of Waiik, wine growers are experiencing a surprising phenomena, which is not without consequences for the vines and grapes. Chloe Somerset is one of the youngest winemakers on Waiik. Every day she must inspect the 6 miles of safety nets covering her estate.
Oh, here's another hole in the net. God, the birds get on top of these and just tear holes in the nets.
I'll come through later and have to fix it up.
Yeah.
The safety nets, which are a unique feature in this part of New Zealand, are installed just before the grapes reach maturity and are removed for the harvest.
We have a lot of introduced species of birds in New Zealand that have come from other countries, and they eat the grapes, and also they can damage the fruit too. So if they peck into a berry, that opens the berry and then disease can get inside. So it's not just cleaning out fruit, but it's also damaging the fruit and lowering the quality.
Starlings can form groups of over 100,000 individuals. But just 5,000 can eat 1 ton of grapes in about 10 days. A colossal loss for winemakers. Chloe has a medium-sized operation where the use of nets is still possible. But for the immense vineyards that cover thousands of acres, this protection technique is not possible, and another solution had to be found.
There's actual falcon breeders breeding birds to then put into vineyards, and then they create that vineyard as their territory and chase out any other bird. The problem is there's not enough falcons to go around all of the different vineyards. The vineyards that use that method are typically much larger, so they don't. The infrastructure to put on nets like this on 100 hectares of Sauvignon Blanc isn't really justified. Nick, I actually better go and meet Bob Campbell, I think.
Okay.
I'll leave you to it.
Yep,
and
I'll finish off.
We'll see you at lunchtime.
Yep.
Producing wine in New Zealand is indeed a challenge. One is obliged to remain humble when confronted with its wild and unpredictable nature. Combining the pioneer spirit of conquest and the respect of the island's first inhabitants, New Zealand's wine growers have managed to adapt their vine to this earth at the end of the world while accepting the constraints and fury of this land. They've transformed New Zealand's great outdoors into an internationally renowned wine territory.